Cabo the Great stood in the dimly lit room, his broad shoulders heavy with the weight of failure. His people, his hunters, looked to him for strength, for victory, for hope. But today, he had failed them. Eli, his greatest enemy, still roamed free, a shadow that refused to be erased. Cabo's fists clenched as he stared at the maps sprawled across the table. His second-in-command, Titus, broke the silence. "Cabo," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Eli can wait. We need to focus on building our stronghold. We need walls, supplies, and a plan. Charging out now would be unwise. You know this." Cabo nodded, but the fire in his chest burned hotter. Titus was right, but the thought of Eli out there, free and breathing, was a poison in his veins. There was a knock on the door, and as it creaked open, a woman stepped in. Her name was Naomi. She was tall, her presence commanding, her eyes sharp and calculating. She wore her confidence like armor, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of someone who knew exactly what she wanted. "Cabo," she said, her tone crisp and direct. "I need to speak with you." Cabo looked up, surprised. Naomi was not one for casual conversation. "Speak freely," he said, his deep voice echoing in the room. Naomi glanced at Titus, then back at Cabo. "This is a private matter," she said. Cabo hesitated. Titus was his most trusted advisor, his brother in arms. But something in Naomi's tone made him nod. "Titus, give us a moment." Titus raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. He left the room, closing the door behind him. You are watching the Tales of the Savannah. Subscribe and be part of the tribe. Now let's get back to the story. Naomi stepped closer, her movements deliberate. She looked Cabo straight in the eye. "I have a proposition for you," she said, her voice steady and businesslike. Cabo frowned. "A proposition?" "Yes," she said. "I want to propose a partnership, a union, between you and me." Cabo blinked, caught off guard. "A union?" Naomi nodded. "You are the leader of the hunters. The people look to you for strength, for guidance. But you are alone. A leader needs a partner, someone to stand beside him, to strengthen his position. I am that person." Cabo stared at her, trying to process her words. This was not a confession of love or a plea for affection. This was a calculated move, a strategic alliance. And yet, there was something in her eyes, a flicker of something deeper, something she was careful to hide. He couldn't help but notice the curve of her lips, the way her hair framed her face, the intensity in her eyes. She was breathtaking, and for a moment, he forgot to breathe. "You're proposing a marriage of convenience," he said slowly. Naomi tilted her head, a small smile playing on her lips. "Call it what you will. But think about it, Cabo. Together, we would be unstoppable. The people would see us as a united front. It would give them hope. And hope is what we need right now." Cabo's mind raced. He had not thought of love or partnership since Adia's death. The idea of marrying again felt foreign, almost wrong. But Naomi's words made sense. This was not about love. This was about survival, about strength. She leaned in slightly, her breath warm against his skin as she spoke. Cabo felt a jolt of electricity run through him, a tension he hadn't felt in years. He had been a widower for so long, his heart buried with Adia. But Naomi's presence, her boldness, her beauty, it stirred something in him, something he had thought long dead. "And what do you get out of this?" he asked, his voice low. Naomi's smile widened. "Power," she said simply, "a seat at your side, a voice in the decisions that shape our future, and the chance to make history." Cabo studied her, his eyes piercing. She was bold, ambitious, and unafraid. Qualities he admired, qualities he needed. "And if I say no?" he asked. Naomi shrugged. "Then I walk away. But you'll be missing an opportunity, and so will I." She moved even closer, her body almost touching his. Cabo could feel the heat radiating from her, could see the faint pulse in her neck. Her lips were so close, her breath warm against his skin. The air between them crackled with tension, a magnetic pull that neither of them could deny. "Do you object to this, Cabo?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. Her eyes bore into his, searching for the truth. Cabo's heart pounded in his chest. He should say no. He should walk away, but he couldn't. Not when she was standing so close, not when her presence felt like a fire reigniting something deep within him. "No," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I do not object." Naomi's smile returned, slow and triumphant. "Good," she said, her voice a whisper. "Then I will see you tonight." With that, she turned and walked out of the room, her steps confident and unhurried. But as soon as she rounded the corner, her composure cracked. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. Her legs felt like they might give out. She had done it. She had been bold. And now it was up to Cabo. Back in the war room, Cabo stood alone, his thoughts a storm. Naomi's proposal lingered in his mind. He thought of Adia, of the life they had shared. But that life was gone, and the world had changed. He was no longer the man he had been. He was Cabo the Great, leader of the hunters, and the hunters needed him to be strong. Titus returned, his expression curious. What did she want? Cabo looked at him. "A partnership," he said simply. Titus raised an eyebrow. "A partnership?" Cabo nodded. "A union between her and me." Titus's eyes widened, but he said nothing. He knew better than to press Cabo for details. As Cabo turned back to the maps, his mind was no longer on Eli or the war. It was on Naomi, on her boldness, her ambition, her unshakable confidence. She was unlike anyone he had ever known, and though he didn't fully understand it yet, he felt something shift inside him. Something dangerous, something thrilling. Meanwhile, outside, Naomi leaned against the wall, her heart still racing. She had taken a risk, but it was a risk worth taking. She was ready to stand by Cabo's side, ready to be the first lady of the hunters, ready to make history. Tendai burst into the dining hall, his chest heaving, his shirt clinging to his damp skin. The dream still clung to him like a second shadow, vivid and unshakable. His heart pounded, not just from running, but from the images that had played out in his sleep. Malaika. Her name echoed in his mind like a drumbeat. Her face, her laugh, the way she moved. It was all there, so real, so close. But it wasn't just her. There had been something else, something he couldn't quite grasp. A heat, a longing, a feeling he had never experienced before. His body still tingled with the memory of it, and he felt a strange mix of shame and excitement. He glanced around the room. His grandfather Zoro sat at the head of the table, his sharp eyes scanning Tendai as he entered. Sia, Tendai's father, was already halfway out the door, his face dark and distracted. Tendai wanted to call out to him, to ask where he was going, but the words caught in his throat. Something was off. His father's shoulders were tense, his steps hurried, as if he were carrying a weight too heavy to bear. "You're late," Zoro said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. He didn't look up from his plate, but Tendai could feel the weight of his disappointment. I overslept," Tendai stammered, sliding into his seat. He avoided his grandfather's eyes, focusing instead on the food in front of him, but his appetite was gone. His mind was still back in the dream, back with Malaika. He could almost feel her breath on his skin, her fingers brushing against his. He shook his head, trying to clear the thoughts, but they clung to him like smoke. Zoro watched him carefully, his fork hovering mid-air. "You look sick," he said, his tone softer now. "Are you feeling all right?" Tendai nodded quickly, too quickly. "I'm fine. Just a strange dream." Zoro raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Tendai was grateful. He didn't know how to explain what he had seen, what he had felt. It wasn't just a dream. It was something deeper, something that had left him restless and unsettled. He glanced toward the door where his father had disappeared. Sia had been acting strange lately, distant and preoccupied. "Your father has a lot on his mind," Zoro said, as if reading Tendai's thoughts. "He'll come around." Tendai nodded again, but he wasn't so sure. Something had changed. Something was wrong. He could feel it in the air, like the calm before a storm. He picked at his food, his thoughts drifting back to Malaika. Why had she been haunting his dreams since the celebrations? Why had it felt so real? And why was she ignoring him now? He had tried to talk to her, just to say hi, but she had turned away, her eyes cold and distant. The other night, she had asked him to dance, and now she didn't want to speak to him at all. It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. Zoro cleared his throat, pulling Tendai back to the present. "You've been distracted lately," he said, his voice low but firm. "Your training is suffering. You need to focus." Tendai looked up, meeting his grandfather's eyes. There was no anger in Zoro's expression, only concern. Tendai wanted to tell him everything, about the dreams, about Malaika, about the strange feelings he couldn't shake, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he just nodded. "I'll do better," he said quietly. Zoro studied him for a moment, then sighed. "See that you do. The world doesn't wait for anyone, Tendai. Not even you." Tendai nodded, pushing his plate away, his stomach churning. He needed to clear his head to figure out what was happening to him. But before he could stand, Zoro spoke again. "Your father is going away for a while," he said, his voice steady but with an edge of something Tendai couldn't quite place. "He has business to attend to." Tendai's heart skipped a beat. "What kind of business?" Zoro hesitated, then shook his head. "It's not for you to worry about. Just focus on your training and stay out of trouble." Tendai wanted to argue, to demand answers, but he knew it was pointless. Zoro had made up his mind. Whatever was happening, Tendai was being kept in the dark, again. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I need to go," he said, his voice tight. "I'll be late for training." Zoro nodded. "Go on then. But remember what I said." Tendai didn't respond. He turned and walked out of the room. Saya paced back and forth, his boots scraping against the rough stone floor. Zoro's words echoed in his mind, shaking him to his core. He couldn't just sit here. He couldn't. Palesa was out there, alone, hunted. The thought of her in danger gnawed at him, a relentless ache he couldn't ignore. But leaving wasn't simple. Cabo would have to approve it, and even then the journey would be dangerous. Still, he had no choice. He had to go. As he turned toward Cabo's quarters, he saw Tendai rushing past, late for breakfast as usual these days. Sia almost called out to him, almost stopped to ask what was troubling his son. But there was no time. Tendai would have to figure things out on his own. Sia had bigger problems now. He reached Cabo's door and knocked firmly, the sound sharp and urgent. After a moment, the door creaked open, revealing Cabo's stern face. The elder leader's piercing eyes locked onto Sia's, instantly sensing the tension. "Sia," Cabo said, his voice calm but curious. "What brings you here so early?" "I need your permission to leave," Sia said, cutting straight to the point. Cabo's eyebrow lifted. "Leave? Why?" Sia hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I'd like to be sent on patrol," he said, his tone almost questioning. "On patrol?" Cabo repeated. "Why? Your team is the best we have. You're our top hunters. Why would you want to patrol? Besides, you have just come from a hunt. Why rush into another so soon?" Sia clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay calm. "I just want to feel involved. That's all." Cabo studied him for a long moment, his eyes sharp. "How long do you plan to be gone?" "A few weeks," Sia replied, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "A few weeks?" Cabo's tone was skeptical. "And what about your team? Your son? He's a new hunter. He needs training." Sia's stomach churned. He hadn't thought this through. "I was hoping to join another team if they can use one more member," he said quickly. Cabo shook his head. "Nonsense. Tendai needs experience, and so does Malaika. She's been asking to join your team for months. This is the perfect opportunity." Sia's heart sank. This was worse than he'd imagined. taking Tendai and Malaika with him? It was a disaster waiting to happen, but he couldn't argue, not without raising more suspicion. "Thank you," he said, his voice tight. "We'll prepare and leave at first light." Cabo nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Good. Be safe out there." Sia turned and walked away, his mind racing. This was a mistake. A huge mistake. He couldn't risk Tendai meeting Palesa. Not like this. Not when it could cost her life. But there was no way out now. He had to go through with it. When he returned to the dining hall, Tendai was back. Something about how he was late for his session, so it was cancelled, and Zoro was there lecturing him. Tendai looked up at his father, concerned. "What happened?" he asked. Sia's face was pale, drained of all color. Zoro also noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice low and concerned. "He agreed," Sia said quietly. "But there's a condition." "What condition?" Zoro pressed. Sia took a deep breath. "He wants me to take Tendai and Malaika with me." Tendai's eyes widened, a spark of excitement flashing in them. "Malaika?" he repeated, his voice trembling slightly. The mention of her name sent a shiver down his spine. This was his chance to apologize, to make things right. "When do we leave, father?" Tendai asked, his voice eager. "Tomorrow morning," Sia replied, his tone heavy. "At the break of dawn." Zoro's face darkened, but he said nothing. He understood the danger, the weight of what Sia was carrying. Tendai, on the other hand, was oblivious, his mind already racing with thoughts of Malaika and the adventure ahead. Sia looked at his son, a knot of dread tightening in his chest. This was a mistake, a terrible mistake. But there was no turning back now. He had to protect Palesa from her own son, even if it meant risking everything. As the three of them sat in silence, the air thick with unspoken fears, Sia couldn't shake the feeling that this journey would change everything, and not for the better. Dilo, Samuel, and Nandi walked through the forest on their way to the snake people. It was good to be outside of the hunters' headquarters. It was always good to be in the forest. As hunters, they loved the wild, and Nandi had not been out for a very long time. She wanted to savor this moment, away from the technology, away from the hum of the machines. Out here, she could breathe. Out here, she could remember who she was. She smiled to herself, but suddenly felt something churning in her stomach. A wave of nausea hit her. She clutched her side, her face pale. Diallo and Samuel turned to her, their eyes narrowing. "Stay here," she muttered, her voice strained. "I'm not feeling well." Before they could respond, she darted behind a tree, her hand pressed to her mouth. Diallo watched her go, his expression darkening. He didn't trust her sudden illness. Not now. Not when so much was at stake. Samuel stood silently, his arms crossed, his eyes fixed on the ground. Diallo stepped closer, his voice low and urgent. "Samuel," he said, "what is the progress with Nala?" Samuel hesitated, his jaw tightening. "She's difficult," he admitted. "I've tried to reach her, to make her see reason, but her heart, it belongs to someone else." Diallo's eyes flashed. "Someone else? Who?" "Kwame," Samuel said, the name bitter on his tongue. "He was here for only a few days, but it was enough. She's chosen him." Diallo's fists clenched. "This cannot be. You know what is at stake. The union between you and Nala must happen. It is not about love. It is about survival. The secret must be protected. You have my permission to marry her. You have her mother's blessing. Do not fail us." Samuel looked away, shame burning in his chest. He had tried everything. Kind words, gifts, even subtle threats. But Nala's heart was a fortress, yet Kwame had found a way inside. I will try again," Samuel said. "You better do that," Diallo said. Nandi straightened, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand as she stepped out from behind the tree. "Let's keep moving," Diallo said at last, his voice sharp. "We have a long way to go." Nandi and Samuel nodded and continued to follow Diallo. The forest grew silent, as if holding its breath. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and ancient trees. Diallo, Samuel and Nandi stood frozen, their eyes darting to the shadows. Slowly, figures emerged, sleek, silent, and deadly. The snake people. Their eyes glinted like shards of glass, their movements fluid and unnerving. They were everywhere, surrounding the hunters in a tight, unbreakable circle. "We come in peace," Diallo said, his voice firm but loud enough to carry through the stillness. He raised his hands, showing he meant no harm. "We wish to speak to your queen. It's about the peace agreement." For a moment, there was no response. Then, a low hiss rippled through the air, and the snake people parted, creating a path. Without a word, they began to move, gesturing for the hunters to follow. Nandi's heart beat fast as they walked, her eyes taking in the village that came into view. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. The cabins were simple but charming, blending seamlessly with the forest. The snake people watched them curiously. Nandi couldn't help but smile. This was nature in its purest form, raw, untamed, and beautiful. But her smile faded as they approached a larger cabin, grander than the rest. Inside, seated on a throne, was Queen Amina. Her presence was commanding, her eyes sharp and piercing. The hunters stepped forward, standing before her. "We bring a message from the hunters," Diallo began, his tone respectful but firm. "It concerns the peace you seek." Amina's eyes narrowed. "Speak," she said, her voice cool and measured. Diallo straightened. "You will have your peace for a time." Amina's heart pounded, but her face remained calm. "How long?" she asked, her voice steady. 7 years, Diallo replied, his words final. Amina's lips twitched, almost into a smile. 7 years. It was exactly what she had hoped for. She had asked for 14, knowing they would offer less. 7 years was enough to rebuild, to plan, to secure their future. But she couldn't let them see her satisfaction. "Why 7?" she pressed, her tone sharp. "We proposed 14. Diallo's expression didn't change. "The Council of Elders decided on 7. It's what we can give. In return for the return of our leader, you will have 7 years of peace." Amina nodded slowly. "Very well," she said, "but you will stay for a while. Tomorrow, we have a ceremony. The Guardian of the Forest demands restoration. Perhaps you can learn about our ways. It would be a step toward peace, for 7 years at least." Her eyes shifted to Nandi, lingering for a moment. There was something about her. Amina's sharp eyes noticed the way Nandi carried herself, the faint glow in her cheeks. She was pregnant. The realization sent a ripple of curiosity through Amina. Why had Django, the leader of the hunters, allowed Nandi, his pregnant wife, to come here? What was he playing at? "You are welcome, hunters," Amina said at last, words she never thought would come out of her mouth. "Your quarters will be prepared." As the hunters were led away, Diallo's eyes scanned the village, searching. He was looking for Kwame, the man who had once been a hunter, now transformed into a snake. Diallo had never spoken to Kwame during his time with the hunters, but Kwame's transformation fascinated him to no end. Where had he come from? Who was his mother? Was he one of his? Snake and hunter was an interesting combination. Could it be possible? Now that they were staying, Diallo would have his chance to find out, to get to the bottom of it all. And that, my dear tribe members, brings us to the end of yet another episode in our Snake People and Hunters series. Cabo the Great now faces a proposal that could alter the course of his fate. Naomi has seized control of her destiny, determined to shape her own future. Tendai, caught in the throes of manhood, wrestles with the stirrings of first love, a secret he carries alone, with no one to confide in. Meanwhile, Nandi's pregnancy adds another layer of complexity to the unfolding drama. The hunters have succeeded in reaching the Snake People, delivering their message to Queen Amina, who has extended an invitation for them to stay. But beneath the surface, secrets simmer. Diallo harbors an agenda of his own. He seeks the truth about Kwame. Could he be one of his own, his son? The saga continues, and so does the adventure. Join us next time as we journey further into the heart of the savannah. The story is far from over. A heartfelt thank you to our wonderful friend of the channel, Angel, for yet another generous super thanks. Your kindness and support truly brighten my day, and I'm beyond grateful for your continued encouragement. Thank you for always bringing a smile to my face. Want to support the channel and become an even bigger part of our tribe? You can join for as little as the cost of a coffee each month. Your support helps me continue creating the content you love, but of course, just having you here is already more than enough. Thank you for being part of this journey. A warm and heartfelt thank you to all the amazing tribe members who have chosen to join and support this incredible journey. Your belief in this channel means the world to me, and I'm so glad to have you along for the ride. And as always, thank you for watching our story, and we hope you enjoyed it. What lessons did you draw from this story? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and be part of the tribe. Thank you for watching The Tales of the Savannah. We will see you next time in the Savannah.